There's a moment in this drama where a marble statue breathes. You don't notice it at first. The camera just glides past this row of white, cracked Venus in the dark of a municipal storage room, fluorescent lights humming, dust in the air, and then, barely there, a tiny fog of condensation on cold stone lips. And your brain does that double take like, wait, did I just see that? Did that statue exhale? That's when My Daughter Was Hidden in a Statue stops being just a provocative title and becomes a very specific nightmare that's going to live under your skin for a while. You are watching Jonota News, I'm your host Implied, and today we are diving deep into the 2026 thriller My Daughter Was Hidden in a Statue. If you like long, slightly obsessive breakdowns of shows that absolutely should come with a therapist on speed dial, go ahead and tap subscribe so you don't miss the next one. I'm going full spoiler on this one, by the way. This drama is built on twists and reveals, but what makes it interesting isn't who did it so much as what happens to everyone when they realize what they've done, so we are going to talk about all of it. The opening stretch sets the tone with almost zero dialogue. It's just this slow, methodical wander through what looks like a municipal graveyard for art, chipped busts, broken angels, a toppled bronze horse. And then the camera settles on the Venus. She's classical, arms broken off in that familiar way, torso smooth but slightly off. If you stare long enough, you see fine hairline seams around the waist and neck, like someone reassembled her. We hear faint knocking under the hum of the light. Not dramatic, life-ordered banging. Weak, arrhythmic taps. A close-up, the stone chest barely rising. A tiny sound that might be a breath, or might be the mind filling in the horror the show is suggesting. It's sick, it's slow, and it immediately tells you this story is not going to flinch. Then smash cut to glass, steel, and money. Helena Varga in her corner office, bathed in blue city light, signing away another few million like it's a grocery receipt. The camera loves her reflection, half her face in the window, half in shadow. Kim Hye-jin plays Helena with this perfect combination of surgical calm and hairline cracks. In the first breakfast scene with her daughter Elena, you get everything about their relationship in under 5 minutes. Elena wanders in late, paint still under her fingernails, headphones around her neck, scarf thrown over a stained sweatshirt. Helena's in immaculate cream silk, watching Elena like she's a project that keeps refusing to get finished. Their banter is tight and funny. Elena teases Helena about owning half the city but never having time for coffee. Helene fires back about Elena's starving artist persona funded by very non-starving accounts, but it's edgy. You can feel how long they've been having versions of this argument. What the show does really well in this early stretch is plant tiny emotional landmines. Elena's late for a critic visit at the museum where she's restoring old sculptures. Helene tells her, one day, you'll understand that people with power don't wait. Elena snaps, and one day you'll understand that not everything can be controlled. It sounds like standard mother-daughter TV dialogue. You don't realize until way later how cruelly the plot is going to twist those lines back on both of them. And lurking in the background of all this domestic tension is the city's golden boy, Mayor Adrian Kuhlman. On paper, he's a reformist, a widowed father, the guy who wears a rolled-up white shirt and promises clean water and transparent budgets. On screen, he's Tomas Dobrev with a shark's smile. The early campaign rally is framed like a music video, drones sweeping over crowds, confetti cannons, kids in his merch. And then, almost subliminally, the camera dips under the stage to show where the power cables tangle into a nest of extension cords next to crates labeled for art storage. The same inventory stickers we just saw in that creepy opening warehouse. You already know the mayor's shiny image is literally standing on top of something rotten. This is one of those shows where you can feel the conspiracy breathing beneath normal scenes before anyone says the word conspiracy. Helena funds an anti-corruption foundation that's quietly preparing to drop a report on Adrian's real estate deals. Adrian's top fixer, Dr. Victor Seo, runs a private clinic whose elevator never seems to stop on the documented floors. Elena's museum director has been begging the city for restoration funds and keeps getting routed through the mayor's office. Everyone is connected by paperwork and concrete long before they're connected by blood and violence. The actual disappearance is almost mundane, and that's what makes it nasty. Elena has this small, private victory. The museum finally approves her proposal to rehouse a damaged Venus from the city depot into a new exhibition. She's giddy, taking selfies with the crate in the background, texting her best friend Anya, sending her mom a photo with a rare, "Look, they listened to me first for once." Helena's assistant shows Helena the message. Helena smirks but saves the photo as her phone wallpaper when no one's looking. And that tiny detail becomes so painful the instant the timeline fractures. That night, Elena leaves the museum alone. It's raining, of course it is, but it's not one of those thriller thunderstorms. It's more of a cold, annoying drizzle that makes everything grey. She FaceTimes Anya as she cuts through the plaza, complaining about how the Venus crate smells like wet stone and rat poop. We see her stop under a street lamp, camera stuttering as the signal falters. A city maintenance van pulls up behind her, bland logo, half-peeled. Anya hears Elena say, "Hang on, there's a guy from the depot, I think they need me to sign something," and then the call freezes on Elena's annoyed eye roll. When it unfreezes, it's just the dial tone. At first, the show lets Helene handle it the normal way. She calls, she texts, she gets voicemail. She half scolds, half jokes in voice messages, "Elena, if you are off with some sculptor with bad tattoos and worse hygiene, at least answer so I know you are alive." Eventually, she calls the police. They shrug. 20-something woman, night out, no direct signs of foul play. And this is where Helena's money becomes a character all on its own. She tries to buy urgency, private search teams, reward posters covering every bus stop, CCTV analysis on every street Elena might have walked. We watch her sit in a dark room as a tech scrubs through hours of grainy footage, reflected on her face, until we finally see Elena headed toward the depot alley. Then, glitch. 3 seconds of static. When the image returns, the street is empty. The story really tightens its grip once Helene realizes she's not just fighting indifference, she's fighting active sabotage. Footage deleted, logs altered, the maintenance van not on any city record. At the same time, the mayor goes on TV offering heartfelt support and promising full cooperation in the search, which plays like compassion but to Helene feels like a threat. There's a gorgeous scene where she's at a charity gala he's hosting, both of them in black tie armor, champagne between them like a barrier. He asks, "Any news?" in that politician's sorrowful tone. She watches him, eyes dead, and says, "I don't think you want me to find any." Then she smiles for the cameras. And just when you think this is going to be a straightforward missing person versus corrupt system show, the drama drops its nastiest move. Elena walks back through the door. It's exactly 3 weeks after the disappearance. Helene is skeletal with lack of sleep, the apartment is overrun with printouts and timelines, and her mother, Elena's grandmother, has started lighting candles to saints Helene doesn't believe in. The front door beeps, and there she is. Elena. Same slim frame, same hajel eyes, same crooked little scar on the chin from when she fell off a bike at 12. She's carrying takeout noodles and an overstuffed backpack, complaining about losing her phone during a stupid art retreat where there was no reception. The grandmother bursts into tears. Helena freezes. The directing choice here is genius. We never see Helene rush to hug her. Other people rush. The camera stays on Helena as everyone piles onto this Elena in relief. Helena's hand flexes just a fraction, like she's about to move, then stops. Her pupils narrow. There's this quiet horror in her posture that you don't get unless you are really watching. This is the first time the show lets the audience feel how sharp Helena's intuition is. Something in her looks at this girl and recognizes her face, her voice, but not her. The actor playing Elena, Sophia Park, has the most fun here, because she's literally playing two versions of the same person and the difference is all in these tiny, behavioral quirks. The Ellen, who comes back, chews on the wrong side of her lip. She hugs with both arms around the shoulders instead of one around the waist and one around the neck. She doesn't flinch when Grandma calls her Little Comet, a nickname Elena always pretended to hate. It's so subtle you can almost convince yourself you are imagining it. exactly like Helene is trying to do. That sense of the uncanny builds slowly in domestic scenes that would be comforting in any other drama. Elena stands in the kitchen, making the same late-night grilled cheese she used to make as a kid. Helene comes home, stops in the doorway. "You never toast the bread that dark," Helene says without thinking. The girl laughs it off. "Guess I finally learned to cook while I was gone." Later, Helene passes her daughter's piano and notices the sheet music. The real Elena always played with her left hand slightly stiff, from that childhood fracture. This Elena's fingering markings are perfect, symmetrical. It's like living with a beautiful forgery. The show keeps cutting between Helena's growing suspicion and these unsettling dreamlike flashes of the truth. We get our first glimpse of the surgical table about 2 episodes in, or, in structure terms, right when Helena starts to keep a diary of wrong details. The screen hard cuts from her writing, "She forgot Dad's allergies," to a close-up of latex gloves cutting into someone's skin. It's not Elena yet. It's the girl who will become her. Her name is Mira at first, and she's introduced in the least glamorous setting imaginable, the basement of a halfway house that's being quietly shut down to make room for a luxury condo project. Adrian visits under the guise of touring social programs. The scene plays weird if you are not paying attention. Why is the mayor spending 10 minutes with a single girl sitting alone on a bunk bed? He asks about her missing documents, the surgeries she wants but can't afford, her lack of family. Then he makes an offer. The camera never shows his face as he says, "I can give you a life. A name people respect. All you have to do is become someone who's already dead." It only shows Mira's eyes going wide, filling with this mix of hunger and terror. This is where we get nudged into full-on body horror territory, and I'll be honest, some of these sequences are rough. Dr. Victor's clinic is all white corridors and soft music, but the operations themselves are filmed like a violation. Mira lies there, awake but sedated, while they map Elena's face onto hers. The show doesn't indulge in gore, it's more interested in the psychological violation. You see Mira rehearsing Elena's smile in a mirror while her face is still stitched and swollen. She listens to recordings of Elena's voice, repeating lines from interviews Helena gave about her only child. It's monstrous and heartbreaking because you understand why she's doing it. Every adult who should have protected her has treated her like a blank. Parallel to this, Elena's real hell begins. The kidnapping itself is disorienting by design. The van door slides open. A man in a city jacket says something about a water main leak at the museum. She leans in, needle, blackout. When she wakes, it's not in a cliché warehouse chair. It's lying on her side in pitch darkness, something hard and curved against her back, limbs constrained by cold stone. She can't move her arms properly, her legs are bent painfully, pressed against an unyielding shell. There's a tube in her mouth, taped at the corners, clamped between her teeth. At first, you don't understand where she is. Neither does she. The sound design here is vicious. You hear her panicked breaths echo against stone. Every tiny movement scrapes her skin. She tries to scream and just hears this muffled, animal noise swallowed by the cavity she's trapped in. Then, faintly, beyond the walls, Maine's voices. They talk about weight, transport, and exhibition. One of them laughs and says, "Don't drop the Venus, the mayor's got a thing for her." That's when Elena realizes she's not in a room. She is the room. She's inside the statue they mocked earlier, sealed in with plaster and resin and painkillers just barely enough to keep her heart from exploding. What's so effective is how long the show keeps her there. It's not one sequence and then a time jump. Every now and then across multiple episodes, we cut back to her consciousness flickering in and out inside that marble coffin. We see her try to count the hours by the time light filters faintly through the air hole near what would be the statue's neck. We see her body start to give out, her skin stuck to the inner plaster, muscles cramping, voice shredded by screaming into stone. At one point, rats scratch nearby, and she bangs her head against the interior just to scare them away. It's genuinely hellish, and yet the camera never treats her like a spectacle. It stays on her eyes, on the effort to hang on to the idea of herself as a person. And while she's literally entombed, the girl wearing her face is moving in. Mira as Elena walks into Helena's penthouse like she won the lottery, and the execution on screen is fascinating. For the first couple of days, she's almost too perfect. She remembers specific anecdotes, knows names of employees, reacts correctly when she sees the portrait of Helena's late husband. But it's precisely her perfection that unnerves Helena. The real Elena had edges. She sulked, she slammed doors, she challenged Helena's business ethics at the dinner table. This daughter is smooth, agreeable, polite to a fault. There's a tiny scene where Helene offers to reschedule a foundation board meeting to spend time together, and Elena immediately says, "No, you should go. The city needs you." Helena's eyes flick up, alarmed, because the real Elena would have seized that as leverage to guilt her. The face-off between Helene and Elena at this stage is almost like a spy thriller. They circle each other behaviorally instead of with guns. Helene starts setting traps. She leaves a jar on the top shelf of the pantry, where the shorter Elena used to stand on a chair. The new Elena just reaches it with no hesitation. She casually asks, "Do you remember what song I sang at your dad's funeral?" A real mother who would actually processed her grief properly might accept a generic answer. Helene remembers the exact song and key. When Elena gets it wrong, Helene doesn't correct her out loud, but you see something in her snap. Right when the tension between them is thick enough to cut, the show deepens it by giving us Mira's side. It would have been easy to paint her as a pure snake, this invader stealing someone else's life. Instead, we get these tiny scenes of her alone in her borrowed bedroom, clutching an old stuffed bear she managed to sneak in, whispering practice lines to herself. "Mom, can you pass the salt? Mom, I had a weird dream." She's terrified. Adrian's people monitor her constantly. Dr. Victor calls nightly to check her vitals, but really to deliver threats about what happens if she deviates from script. She has pictures of Elena's life to study, but no idea who Elena actually was, emotionally. That gap is where her humanity cracks through. The ethical gray zone this creates is delicious and awful. Helene is right, this is a stranger playing her daughter. But the stranger is also a victim, altered and blackmailed by the same man Helene is fighting. There's a quiet moment where Helene watches the imposter sleep, hair spread on the pillow exactly like Elena's used to, and whispers, "What did he do to you?" You can see the question tugging at her. Is this girl a tool, or is she also someone's child? The show uses visual contrasts beautifully here. Every time we are with Helene and Elena in the penthouse, the palette is warm neutrals, soft lamps, glass reflecting the city. Whenever we go back to Elena trapped in the statue, everything is blue-gray, lit only by slivers of light through cracks, like the world squeezing into her tomb. And then there's Adrian's world, sleek campaign buses, bright public forums, art-rich office suites where he poses with rescued statues from the city depot, blissfully unaware that one of them is literally torturing a girl inside. And then, mid-season, Helena's investigation finally crashes back into Elena's hidden reality, and this is where the series levels up. Helena being wealthy isn't just a background trait, she weaponizes it. When the official police channels stall, she quietly retains Ryan Kovacs, a former investigative journalist turned private security consultant. I love Ryan as a character because he's basically the audience surrogate who got too tired of screaming at the news and decided to pick up a camera and follow the money instead. He's scruffy, world-weary, allergic to Helena's boardroom speak at first. Their early meetings are mostly battles over control. She expects an employee. He insists on treating her like a source. Ryan starts where the police stopped, the broken CCTV chain. He notices something off about the timestamps on the maintenance van footage. They don't just disappear, they loop, as if someone copy-pasted a previous day's file over the crucial minutes. That points straight to the mayor's digital infrastructure office. At the same time, Anya sends Helene an email with old museum photos. In the background of one, Helene notices the inventory label on the damaged Venus crate Elena had been excited about, VM324. When Ryan hacks into the city's art storage database, VM324 shows a weird transfer. Instead of going into the museum exhibition, it's logged as temporarily exhibited in the lobby of Adrian's campaign headquarters, then loaned to a private collection whose owner is redacted. The idea that Elena might somehow be connected to that statue gnaws at Helene, but she doesn't yet leap to the truth. Why would she? Who imagines their child entombed in marble? Her first thought is that the statue is the key to the timeline. If she can see the physical object Elena was working on, maybe she can reconstruct her final movements. So she uses the only language Adrian understands, money. Helene arranges a charity auction of city-held art in the name of supporting underfunded restoration departments. She leans on council members, dangles donations. Adrian can't publicly refuse without looking like he hates culture and orphans, so he agrees, smirking, thinking he can control which items get released. Among the lots is VM324, the Venus. The moment Helena sees the photo in the catalogue, her hand shakes. It's nothing more than a grainy image of a torso on a plinth, but there's a chill in her reaction, like some part of her already knows. The auction sequence is one of my favorite stretches of the show, and not just because it's dripping with class politics. You've got the city's elite sipping champagne, bidding on relics they barely understand, while in cutaways we see Elena's mouth inside that same statue crack, lips crusted with blood, trying to suck air through a blocked tube. The editing crosscuts between Helene casually lifting her paddle and Elena's hand scraping against stone. The auctioneer jokes about bidding on beauty with a past, and Elena screams soundlessly as someone bumps the statue during transport. This is also where the music really flexes. Up till now, the score has been a mix of strings and uneasy electronic drones, always pulling back from melodrama. Here, as Helene outbids Adrian's shell buyer for the Venus, there's a single, pure piano note that holds just a fraction too long, like someone's holding their breath. When the hammer falls and Helene wins the statue, that note resolves into a minor chord that made my stomach drop. Because you feel like she's won something, yes, but what exactly has she taken home? Back at Helene's private warehouse, the discovery plays out slower than you want it to. She doesn't cut into the statue right away, that would be too on the nose. Instead, she walks around it, hands clasped behind her back like a collector, Rian watching her with barely contained impatience. The Venus is cracked, stained, ordinary. She reaches out, touches the stone where the heart would be, and jerks back. There's warmth. Barely, but enough. Rian jokes, well, at least the heating in here works, but Helene's face has gone white. And this is where the show delivers one of those mini-scenes that will stay with you long after the credits. It's just Helene and a hammer. No flashbacks, no showy flourishes. She sends everyone away under the pretext of wanting a moment with the piece. The warehouse lights hum. She holds the first tool she can grab, a blunt metal chisel, and presses her ear to the statue's torso. For a second, there's nothing. Then, tap. Faint. From the inside. She doesn't scream. She doesn't run. She very quietly starts to shake. Every blow she delivers to that stone feels like an act of violence and salvation at once. Chips fly, dust bursts into her hair, the sound is brutal and echoing. As she cracks open the hollow interior, the camera goes weirdly still, almost respectful. We see fingers first, numb and grey, trembling as they feel air. Then an eye, wild and bloodshot, peering out of a fissure. There's a tiny, wet gasp as the tube in Elena's mouth dislodges. Helene drops the hammer, claws at the brake with bare hands, tearing her nails, sobbing silently. She doesn't shout Elena's name until she actually touches her daughter's skin. Up till then it's like she doesn't dare believe. I had to pause there. No exaggeration. I literally stopped the episode, walked around my apartment, and checked the backs of my own shelves and cupboards like an idiot, just to reassure myself nothing, no one, was sealed inside my decor. That's how viscerally the show sells the horror of that idea, that a person can be so close, so physically present in a space, and yet absolutely unseen. From this point on, the emotional stakes are completely transformed. Helene doesn't call an ambulance immediately. And that decision tells you everything about both her trauma and her calculation. She knows whoever did this has hooks in the system. If she rushes her barely alive daughter into the same network of hospitals the mayor funds, he'll find out before Elena can even say a word. So she does the monstrous, rational thing, she turns one of her own properties into a clandestine ICU. She calls only one doctor she trusts, an old friend, Lajos, whose license Helene once quietly saved during a malpractice scandal. Now it's time to collect. Lajos' shock when he realizes what he's treating is a person, not a smuggling victim in a box or some twisted art project, grounds the horror. He keeps saying, 3 months? This is impossible. The infections alone, but Elena, barely conscious, squeezes Helena's hand once, twice, like she's counting something. She can't speak, her vocal cords are shredded. Her legs are a mess of atrophied muscle and bed sores where the plaster rubbed her raw. One arm doesn't fully respond. The mutilation isn't cinematic, it's clinical. Every injury has a grim logic, done not to kill, but to keep her contained. Helena's instinct is to remove the rest of the world. She limits access to that improvised hospital to 3 people, herself, Lajos, and Rian. There's this almost gothic triangle here, the wealthy matriarch, the haunted doctor, the cynical investigator, all tending to a living ghost. Rian, who has spent his career exposing distant atrocities, is suddenly kneeling next to this girl, apologizing under his breath for not finding her sooner. Lajos fights his own terror of losing his license again as he does borderline illegal procedures without any paperwork. And Helena. Helena sits and reads Elena's favorite childhood stories aloud, even though Elena's eyes stay mostly closed. She doesn't ask about the warehouse, the statue, the screams. Not yet. The silence between them is heavy with things unsaid. I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry you were right about the people I underestimated. And here's the really twisted layer. While Helene is tending to the real Elena in secret, the imposter is still upstairs in the penthouse, living the Elena life more convincingly with every day. She has no idea the original has been found. Adrian thinks the Venus is out of circulation, maybe in some oligarch's yard, so he's not panicking. He's more worried about rumors that Helena is about to release a new corruption report. The drama turns this into an airy domestic thriller, 2 daughters in one city, one recovering in the dark, one walking around in her skin. This duality lets the show explore identity in a way that's more than just plot gimmick. There's a moment where fake Elena stands in front of a mirror in Helena's bedroom, trying on a piece of Helena's jewelry. It's a necklace Helene wore in a magazine spread where she talked about motherhood and power. Mira fastens it, stares at herself, then unfastens it so fast she almost drops it, as if she's touched a hot stove. She whispers, "That's not mine," and we realize she still believes this whole life is temporary, something she'll eventually hand back and walk away from. The tragedy is that, by then, it's too late. She's already implicated. Around this time, Helena's suspicion towards the fake daughter hardens into certainty, and she uses that certainty like a knife. There's an excruciating dinner scene where Helena, the imposter, and Helena's mother sit around a roast chicken like a parody of family bliss. Helena's grandmother chatters about how Elena used to bury peas under her mashed potatoes. Elena laughs and says, "I still do that," and picks a piece with her fork. Helene watches like a hawk. The real Elena hated peas so much she used to feed them to the dog under the table. This girl's fork goes straight into her mouth. Instead of exploding, Helena smiles. "You've changed," she says softly. "In good ways." The compliment lands like a stone. Sophia Park is incredible in this beat, her shoulders tense just a fraction, eyes flicker to Helena's, measuring if this is approval or test. It's both. Helene is at the stage where she's past pretending everything is normal, but she's still collecting proof. And proof, for her, isn't just about dates and footage. It's about these tiny domestic betrayals. The plot really accelerates once Helene makes the choice not to throw the imposter out immediately. That's a crucial turning point. She knows this girl is working with someone who hurt Elena in ways she can barely fathom. She's also seen enough, through Ryan's digging, to suspect Adrian's hand in all of this. But instead of dragging the imposter to a basement and screaming, she decides to surveil. Keep your enemy close, yes, but there's more. You can see the way she's looking at this imposter as a walking clue. If she cuts her off, she loses the only living thread that leads back to whoever planned the statue entombment. Ryan is creeped out by this strategy. In one scene, he flat out says, "You are letting the person who sat at the table with your daughter's torturer stay in your house." Helene answers, "She is a weapon they sharpened against me. I want to see who forged the blade." It's the kind of line that could have sounded cheesy. Instead, Kim Hye-jin delivers it with such cold resolve that you believe she's crossed some moral Rubicon. Meanwhile, Adrian starts to sense that Helene is up to something beyond the usual philanthropic games. His paranoia triggers a different kind of cruelty. He leans on Mira harder, reminding her of her contract, forged identity papers, the surgery she can't pay back, the whispers that the girl she replaced died in some accident no one will ever talk about. To him, she is an asset, not a person. There's a scene where he calls her to his office under the pretext of media training. He has her stand in front of a camera and answer mock questions about her kidnapping, telling her exactly which answers will convince the public. The way he corrects her posture, touches her chin to tilt her face toward the light, is deeply unsettling. He's literally sculpted her, and now he's adjusting his creation. This is where my one slightly contrarian reaction kicked in, by the way. A lot of viewers I've talked to loved Adrian as this magnetic villain you love to hate. Personally, I found him almost too cleanly evil in these coaching scenes. The show is excellent at shading Helene and Mira with contradictions, but Adrian, especially in this middle stretch, tips toward cartoonishly sadistic at times. The few glimpses we get of his own trauma, a father who beat him, a childhood in a floodplain the city never repaired, are compelling, and I wish the script had trusted those more instead of defaulting to, "Look, he's creepy with statues, get it?" That said, when he's purring lines like, "Grief is a tool, Elena. Use it well," at a girl he helped entomb the real Elena to replace, yeah, I get the appeal of hating him. Back in the hidden ICU, Elena's recovery is slow and ugly, and the show doesn't rush it. For a while, she doesn't trust that Helena touching her hair isn't just another hallucination. She has these flashes of being moved in the statue, forklifts, the sensation of being tilted, voices arguing over whether she's settling. Those memories come out in her words scratched on a pad because she can't speak properly yet. Venus. Mare. Other me. That last one sends a chill through Helena. Other me. Until then, Helene hadn't actually considered that the imposter might not just be an actress but someone permanently altered. The first time Elena sees her own face on TV, because yes, at some point, Adrian decides to parade Elena in a televised charity event, she almost codes. Lajos has left the small TV on in the corner, tuned to the news by habit. Suddenly, there she is, Elena's face, smiling, saying, "I'm just grateful to be home after that awful ordeal." The real Elena's heart rate spikes so fast the monitor screams. She rips off her oxygen mask, clawing at the restraints, eyes wild, trying to scream, "That's me," but nothing coherent comes out. Helena has to pin her down, whispering, "I know. I know." It's one of the cruelest ironies in the show. For weeks, Helene doubted whether her daughter had really come back. Now, when she's finally sure, the world accepts the imposter as the true version. From here, the three women's fates start braiding together. Helena can't tell the authorities about the switch without exposing that she's harboring a victim in a black site kind of setup. Elena can't reclaim her identity publicly because she's too physically and psychologically fragile, and because Adrian's network controls all the official narratives. And Mira is stuck performing her role under threat, increasingly hacked apart by guilt. There's a scene where she sneaks into Elena's old art studio and discovers a half-finished clay sculpture of Helena, rough but tender. Mira touches the clay Helena's face and breaks down, apologizing to a woman who can't hear her. Eventually, Helene decides information is more powerful than secrecy. She sets a trap that forces the imposter to reveal her real allegiance. It's clever and low-tech. She stages a leak. Ryan, accidentally, leaves a folder on the kitchen table with fake documents implying Helene has footage of the kidnapping and plans to release it against Adrian. Then Helene goes on a trip, leaving the penthouse under the pretense of trusting Elena to manage things. Hidden cameras catch the imposter sneaking out with the folder and heading directly, not to a lawyer, not to the police, but to the mayor's fixer. The confrontation after that is not the screaming match you might expect. Helene waits in the darkened living room when Mira returns. The only light comes from the city outside, reflecting on the glass. "Who sent you to me?" Helene asks calmly. No insults, no raised voice. Mira tries to lie at first, hands trembling. Helene slides a tablet across the table showing the footage of her meeting with Victor Essio. Let's not waste each other's time. The truth spills out not in one big confession but in choked fragments. Mira admits she was told Elena died in an accident, that Helene would crumble if she had someone to cling to, that she'd eventually be relocated with a new identity if she played the role well enough. She mentions the surgeries with a kind of disassociation, referring to her old face and her new one as if they belonged to two different people. He said my face didn't matter. That I didn't matter. Just the story. And you see Helene's horror shift slightly, from "you stole my daughter" to "they stole you too." The most chilling line in that exchange comes when Helene asks, "Did you ever meet him?" meaning the one who organized the statue. Mira hesitates, then says, "He never touched me. He never had to. He just signed things." It's such a clean encapsulation of how bureaucratic evil can be. Adrian didn't have to personally brick Elena into marble, he just moved budgets, approved anonymous donations, turned city storage into a playground for his obsessions. The damage he did is entirely in pen strokes. By the time Helena says, "You are going to help me destroy him," you can feel the drama pivoting from mystery into open war. It's not redemption for Mira, not yet. Elena doesn't even know this conversation is happening. But Helena, for all her steel, is still a mother who has been forced to admit there is now more than one girl whose life was warped around her power struggle with a man in office. And that's where I leave this stretch, with Helene and the imposter staring at each other across that glass-walled living room, two women who both wear the word Elena in different ways, about to turn their shared rage on the man who thought he could sculpt reality itself to fit his needs. Helene doesn't ask for a promise that night. She asks for logistics. Who picks you up from school visits? Where Victor keeps his burner phones? How far the clinic basement elevator goes down? It's eerie watching her deconstruct the conspiracy through this girl who's been living in its center without understanding the blueprint. Mira answers in fits and starts, flinching every time Helene's jaw tightens. The power dynamic is warped beyond belief. This is the woman whose life she tried to wear, now coldly asking her to walk back into the lion's mouth with a mic taped under her borrowed skin. The next morning, nothing outwardly has changed. Elena joins Helene for breakfast, hair slightly tousled, oversized hoodie, yogurt with too much honey the way Elena used to eat it. Helene stirs her coffee and asks, casually, "Are you still seeing Dr. Essio for your follow-ups?" Mira's spoon pauses just a beat too long. "Sometimes," she says. "He says I'm healing well." Helene nods. "Good. Tell him I'd like to donate to his clinic." Discreetly. "We'll set up a meeting." On the surface, it's philanthropy. Underneath, it's bait. This sequence where Mira returns to Victor's clinic wired for sound is one of the tensest in the whole drama. Not because there's some high-tech heist going on, but because it's built on the sickening tension of a victim being forced to voluntarily re-enter the site of her abuse. You can hear her breath hitching as the elevator doors close, the faint thump of her heart in the hidden microphone. There's a mirror in the elevator, and for a second she just stares at herself, one hand ghosting over the scar line behind her ear where the last surgery ended. Then she pastes on Elena's breezy charm and steps into the Shark Tank. Victor's office is all tasteful modern art and forgiving lighting, a kind of hospital chic space that's supposed to say, "You are in good hands," while your medical history is being sold to the highest bidder. He greets her with rehearsed warmth, notes Helena's donation offer with a flicker of greed. Their conversation starts innocuous: medication, nightmares, public appearances. Then Mira does what Helena drilled into her. She casually mentions that Helena has been asking strange questions about the art piece connected to her kidnapping. She keeps talking about a Venus. Mira says, feigning confusion. Like the statue my department had in storage? Victor's reaction is microscopic but revealing. A muscle in his cheek jumps. He adjusts his glasses twice. She's traumatized, he says quickly, meaning Helena. People in grief reach for symbols. Then, almost too firmly, he says, you should stay away from that woman's files, Elena. She's not well. For someone whose whole job is keeping lies straight, he overcompensates. And when he later texts Adrian, the mic catches that too. We may have a problem. Varga sniffing around the Venus. Did you move it? Adrian replies with a single word, handle. This is the point where the show shifts from airy paranoia to open moves and counter moves. Helene and Ryan now have concrete proof tying Victor and Adrian to a mysterious Venus project linked to Elena's disappearance. It's not enough for court, but it's enough to scare. Helena's approach is not to go to prosecutors yet. She understands how quickly files get lost when mayors are involved. Instead, she starts weaponizing her other power, public opinion. She leaks a redacted slice of the audio to a sympathetic podcast host, one she's funded before but never manipulated this directly. The clip airs in a late-night episode titled, The Statue and the Missing Girl, and suddenly the city is buzzing with rumors about an art-related cover-up. Adrian's team scrambles. They go into damage control mode, issuing bland statements about ensuring all city property transfers have full documentation while frantically trying to locate the actual Venus. When they realize Helene outbid their shell company for VM324 at the auction, you can feel the panic ripple through Victor's sleek composure. You told me it was destroyed, he hisses into the phone. Adrian's answer is bone cold, you told me she was dead. The show doesn't let us forget that in the middle of this shadow war, there is a girl relearning how to be a person without stone walls around her. Elena's rehab scenes are some of the most quietly devastating. At first, even standing is a battle. There's a sequence where she takes 3 steps from her bed to the window in Helena's secret clinic, each step a jagged inhale, Lajos hovering with a wheelchair just out of frame. The camera stays tight on her feet, bruised, discolored, one toe missing from where infection set in inside the statue. When she collapses, she laughs a little, this bitter, breathless sound. I used to outrun security guards for fun, she rasps, voice barely there. Lajos, trying to lighten the mood, says, give it time, you'll be outrunning them again. She looks at Helena, eyes hard. Will they be coming for me? It's around here that Helene finally tells Elena the full scope of the imposter situation. Up to now, she's drip-fed information, terrified that the knowledge of someone else living her life will break what little stability Elena has. But you can't hide the television forever, and you can't rationalize away a twin walking around your city. The scene where Helena reveals it is unbearably intimate. No dramatic set piece, just a quiet afternoon, the beeping of monitors, a ray of dust-filled light from the high window. Helene sits on the edge of the bed and says, everything I'm about to tell you, I tell you because I trust that you are stronger than what they did to you. That's how she opens. Not, I'm sorry, not, don't be mad, but an affirmation. She explains Adrian's plan, the surgeries, Mira's role. Elena listens without interrupting, jaw clenched so tight you can see the muscles jump. When Helena finishes, Elena's first question is not about the girl. It's, how long did you think she was me? That arrow hits dead center. Helena flinches. She admits she doubted almost from the beginning, but that she also wanted, needed, to believe. That dual confession is brutal, that Helena's intellect saw through the lie while her exhaustion clung to it anyway. Elena turns her head toward the wall. So she got to be me when I was gone, and you almost let that be enough, she whispers. It's one of those lines that feels like a knife and a key in the same breath. The show refuses to paint Elena as purely saintly in this phase. She's understandably angry, but her anger turns sharp in ways that hurt people who are trying to help. She snaps at Lajos, throws a cup at Ryan when he suggests recording her testimony too early, accuses Helene of caring more about her war with Adrian than about Elena's nightmares. In lesser hands this could read as petulance, but Sophia Park plays her recovery with this raw, animal defensiveness. She's fighting for the tiny control she has left over her story, her body, who's allowed to speak for her. And then there's the impending collision none of them are ready for, Elena and Mira in the same room. It doesn't happen through some orchestrated therapy-like setup. It happens because the conspiracy decides to clean house. Victor, feeling the net tighten after the podcast leak, goes rogue in a panic. He sends a pair of hired thugs, not his usual elite security, after Mira with orders to extract and relock if Helene becomes a liability. Translation: kidnap her out from under Helena's nose and dump her somewhere she'll never be found. It's messy and reckless, which is exactly why it succeeds in part. They ambush Mira on her way back from a supposed solo coffee run, tranquilize her in the underground parking garage. What they don't count on is Helena's paranoid overpreparedness. Mira's been carrying a tracker. The rescue scene that follows is half car chase, half haunted house crawl through an old industrial district. Ryan's behind the wheel, muttering that this is not what he signed up for, Helene in the passenger seat tracking the blinking dot on her laptop. They find the van abandoned near an old brick waterworks facility. Inside, the air tastes like rust and mold. They hear muffled scuffling, a shout cut short. The lights go out as soon as they enter because of course they do, it's a trap. The whole thing is shot in this grainy, flashlight beam aesthetic that makes every pipe look like a potential attacker. Helene finds Mira first. She's on the floor of a maintenance room, wrists zip-tied, lips split open, one of the thugs mid-kick. Helene doesn't negotiate. She picks up the closest thing, an iron wrench, and swings. The sound it makes when it connects is sickening. The show has avoided overt violence for most of its run, here it drops the wail. Helene goes at this man like she's channeling 3 months of stored-up helpless fury. Ryan has to physically pull her off before she kills him. The camera only shows us glimpses, blood on tile, a groan, her hand shaking around the wrench, because it's not interested in making it cool. It's interested in showing the line Helene just crossed. In the aftermath, there's no time to call the police. There's another goon somewhere in the building, Mira's sedated, the tracker chirping frantically. Ryan suggests taking Mira to a different safe house. Helene makes a split-second call that will alter everything, we take her to Elena. She argues that splitting their resources will get both girls killed, together, they might protect each other. Ryan points out the obvious, have you considered how your actual daughter might feel about meeting the stranger who stole her life? But Helene is past nuance. I consider not watching another girl disappear because I hesitated, she snaps. So now we get the meeting. It's staged almost like a twisted mirror of the opening breakfast scene. Instead of sunlit glass, it's a dim medical room. Instead of coffee and eggs, 4 drips and antiseptic. Elena, propped up on pillows, gaunt but alert. Mira, groggy, face bruised, stumbling as Ryan supports her into the room. For a beat, both girls just stare. It's like watching someone see their reflection for the first time after a terrible accident and realizing the person in the mirror is both them and not them. The show makes a brilliant choice here, there's no dramatic score. No strings, no swelling piano. Just the steady beep of Elena's heart monitor and the faint hum of an air purifier. That silence forces you to live in the discomfort. Mira whispers, "Oh my God," not at Elena's wounds, but at the fact that the original is alive at all. Elena's eyes travel over Mira's borrowed jawline, the way her nose tilts now, the familiar not familiar shape. She gives a small, humorless laugh. They did a decent job, she rasps. From a distance. Helene steps between them automatically, like she can still shield one from the other. Elena's gaze snaps to her. "Move," she says. It's not loud, but Helene obeys. This is their moment. What's wild is that the first thing Elena says directly to Mira isn't an accusation, it's a question: what did he promise you? The weight of that lands hard. Mira, already crying, says, alive. Then adds, I thought you were gone. I swear. They said you died the first night. You can see Elena doing the maths, cruel and precise. So they killed me and you took my name, she crooks. Not killed, Mira blurts, then clamps a hand over her mouth, as if she's betrayed some unspoken rule. Helene realizes what that slip means before Elena does. The plan hadn't been to let Elena die quickly. The entombment was the plan. This wasn't just about replacing a missing girl. It was about turning her into an object, hidden, immobilized, but technically alive. For what? For how long? That question starts screaming underneath every subsequent episode. Elena eventually tells Mira, you don't get to say my name. Not in front of me. From then on, she calls her Mira, stripping away the stolen identity. It's vicious but absolutely understandable. The complicated part is that Elena's survival, her very chance at revenge, now depends partly on the information only Mira has. They're tied together whether they like it or not. The next run of episodes plays almost like a warped family drama inside a conspiracy thriller. You've got Helena juggling two traumatized young women who both, in very different ways, consider her mother, Elena in truth, Mira in desperate adoption. There's a scene where Helena is so exhausted she nearly calls Mira, sweetheart, by reflex, then stops herself. The flinch on Elena's face when she hears that slip is small but devastating. This is where the show really leans into one of its nastier thematic questions: how many daughters can one woman fail at once? And outside this bunker of hurt, Adrian feels the walls closing in. The podcast leak snowballs into mainstream coverage. Opposition politicians seize on the statue scandal to hammer his administration. Adrian, ever the strategist, decides on a bold counter-move. He announces a massive, public arts initiative, rebranding himself as the guardian of the city's cultural heritage. He schedules a press conference in front of the museum where Elena used to work. And he insists that Elena stand by his side to symbolically reopen the restored sculpture wing. If you are watching closely, you can see Helena's jaw clench when she sees the announcement. Adrian is not just trying to distract, he's trying to reclaim the narrative around the statues completely. He's saying, in effect, I decide what's art, what's trash, who is real and who is a story. It's an audacious PR flex and a personal taunt. This sets up the show's most operatic set piece, the museum gala. The entire cast converges there, their secrets jangling in the rafters. The space, once Elena's quiet refuge for restoration, is now filled with wealthy donors in shimmering gowns, clinking glasses beneath spotlit marble torsos. The camera swoops through the atrium like a curious ghost, catching snippets of dialogue, council members gossiping about the Venus girl, art critics snipping about how the mayor only funds projects that look good in photos. On a dais at the center, under a gauzy curtain, stands a new sculpture shrouded in white, teased as the evening's grand reveal. Helene arrives late, alone, dressed in a severe black suit that looks more like armor than couture. Everyone watches her, half in sympathy, half in morbid curiosity. Some see a grieving mother, others see a potential political bomb. As she moves through the crowd, the sound design dims the background chatter to a muffled roar, isolating her focus. She's scanning exits, CCTV placement, the positions of Adrian's security. She's not here to mourn publicly. She's here to pull a trigger. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Ryan and Lajos have wheeled Elena into a side corridor on a metal gurney, covered with a sheet like a corpse. It's a horrifying echo of the night she was moved as cargo. This time, at least, she's conscious, gripped tight on the railings, every bump sending a flare of pain up her spine. She insisted on coming, against medical advice, despite barely being able to stand. I won't let him use my absence as decor, she told Helena. If he's going to talk about me, I want him to see me. It's not rational. It is absolutely emotionally truthful. And then there's Mira, dressed by Adrian's team in a powder blue dress chosen explicitly because it matches the marble. The level of fetishism here is deliberate and repulsive. They've curled her hair to fall just so, dabbed concealer over her brows, coached her on exactly when to smile and look solemn. Victor hovers with a clipboard, pretending this is a normal gig. Remember, you became stronger because of what happened, he reminds her. You thank the mayor for funding security improvements that will ensure no one else suffers like you did. The words taste like ash in her mouth, but she nods. The actual speech Adrian gives is, infuriatingly, good. He talks about the city, turning its wounds into art, about transforming sites of neglect into spaces of beauty. He gestures toward the shrouded statue as a symbol of that transformation. There are those, he says, pointedly, who would rather drown us in rumors and fear than build something lasting. I stand here, with Elena, as living proof that we can be more than our tragedies. The crowd laps it up, some genuinely moved, some invested in his continued reign. This is where Helene pulls off what I think is the show's smartest bit of staging. She doesn't rush the days, she doesn't scream. She waits. She waits until Adrian invites Ellen up to cut the ribbon on the new exhibition. Mira's hand trembles as she grips the scissors. Then, through her earpiece, because yes, Helene has wired her again, she hears Helena's voice, calm, almost maternal, now. Mira hesitates for half a breath, then drops the scissors. They clatter loudly against the marble, a sharp, ringing sound that cuts through the polite applause. What's wrong? Adrian whispers, smile frozen. The cameras are still rolling. Mira turns not to him but to the crowd. Her voice shakes, but she forces it out. The wrong girl came home, she says into the microphone. The entire room goes still. For a split second, the director gives us a wide shot of shock, Helena's eyes flashing from the audience, Victor paling, reporters leaning forward, the shrouded statue looming like an omen. Back in the hallway, Elena hears this through a live feed on Rian's tablet. There's a moment where rage and vindication bore across her face. She doesn't get to say that, she snarls, trying to push herself off the gurney. Lajos and Rian argue about moving her. She wins. Of course she wins. She hauls herself upright, clinging to the wall, every step toward that atrium a defiance. On stage, Adrian tries to spin. What Elena means is, he starts, but Mira steps away from him, microphone clutched like a lifeline. My name is Mira, she says, and it's the first time she's said it publicly since the surgeries. They took my face. They took her name. Her hand points, slightly off, because she doesn't know exactly where Elena is coming from, but the gesture is accusing enough. Gasps ripple through the crowd. Phones go up, recording. Helene takes that chaos and twists the knife. She walks toward the stage slowly, not running, forcing the camera operators to recalibrate, to follow. Let her finish, she says when a security guard moves to remove Mira. The room recognizes her authority almost as much as Adrian's. Wealth speaks as loudly as office. Mira keeps going, spilling fragments of the story, Victor's clinic, the contracts, the threats. It's messy, not the clean exposé Helene would have preferred, but it's raw and it's true enough to splinter Adrian's carefully curated image. And then the doors at the back of the atrium creak open, and there she is. Elena. Real Elena. One hand on the wall, hospital gown hidden under a long coat, hair mangled, face gaunt but unmistakably the original. For a second, everyone thinks it's some kind of PR stunt, a twin, a body double. The human brain resists the idea that both can be real. But Helena's reaction sells it. She doesn't look surprised. She looks like someone whose worst and best fears just collided in public. This is where the drama flirts with melodrama but, for me, mostly sticks the landing. Elena doesn't launch into a speech. Her body won't let her. She walks straight up to the stage, using the banister-like crutch, and simply stands next to Mira. Two faces, almost the same, side by side. The cameras zoom in. You can hear the collective intake of breath. Adrian, for the first time in the series, looks genuinely rattled. His eyes dart between them, calculus exploding behind his pupils. Helena steps up behind her daughter, a hand hovering an inch from her back, not quite touching. She doesn't want to unbalance her. Into the microphone, with deadly calm, she says, Mayor Kalman, would you like to explain why my daughter spent 3 months inside a city-owned statue while you presented this one? She gestures to Mira, as proof of your compassion. It's not a question designed for an answer. It's a trapdoor. From a purely filmmaking standpoint, this sequence is exhilarating. The sound drops into this slightly underwater mix as Adrian tries to bluster about confusion and political stunts, reporters shouting over each other, security unsure whether to clear the room or stay still. In quick flashes, we see the crowd's faces, disgust, disbelief, some dawning recognition from museum staff who remember Elena's mannerisms. One of the opposition councillors quietly slips away, already composing his next triumphant tweet. If there's one thing that slightly undercuts the power of this moment, it's how quickly the institutional response kicks in after. Within minutes, the feed is cut. For technical reasons, emergency medical teams are called for Elena's well-being, and police escort Adrian out for his safety. The realism of that is high. Of course, the machinery of power would pivot instantly to containment, but as a viewer, a small part of me wanted just 30 more seconds of unfiltered chaos. What follows is less cinematic but in some ways more chilling, the process of making the horror legible to a system built to deny it. Helene hands over the hacked audio, the statue fragments bearing Elena's skin cells, the clinic contracts with Mira's old identity erased in Biro. Elena gives a halting deposition, recounting the van, the darkness, the joking voices calling her Venus. Mira corroborates from the other side, detailing meeting Adrian, signing the papers, going under Victor's knife. It's a tapestry of victim testimony, and you feel how exhausted they are from the simple act of telling it again and again to men in suits who keep asking for clarification. The courtroom stretch, thankfully, is not the focus. The show is too smart to bog down the last episodes in legalese. It gives us enough to understand that Adrian will face trial, that Victor won't be able to hide behind medical jargon, that some of the lower-level operatives are flipping for leniency. But it keeps cutting away from the procedural to linger on the less tidy stuff. Elena in physical therapy, trying to unclench her fist without imagining plaster. Mira in a dingy rented room, now that the penthouse is close to her, sitting with a mirror and trying to get used to her own face again when it no longer feels like theft but also doesn't feel like hers. One of my favorite late-game scenes is actually just Helene and Adrian in a prison visiting room. Glass between them, phones to their ears. No entourage, no reporters. This is personal. Adrian, in a drab jumpsuit, still tries to project that politician calm. You won, he says, almost admiringly. You always did know how to turn a story. Helene doesn't rise to the bait. She simply studies him, like one of the damaged statues she used to fund, and says, you thought you were an artist. You were just a vandal with a budget. He tries to justify himself. He talks about how the city is ungrateful, how he saved Mira from a life on the streets, how he pushed Helene to be honest about her own shady deals. And this is where the show slips in one more thorn. He is not entirely wrong about that last part. Throughout the season, there have been hints that Helena's wealth was built with some of the same tools Adrian uses more crudely: land grabs, rezoning, donations to pliant officials. He says, you built half your fortune on buried people. I just chose a more literal medium. It's a grotesque line, but you see it hit Helena. The disgust on her face isn't just for him. That's one of the show's more quietly daring moves. It refuses to let Helene walk away feeling pure. Yes, she exposed a monster. Yes, she saved her daughter. But she also had the luxury to fight because she was rich enough to bend systems. And some of those systems had hurt people long before Adrian came around. In the final stretch, we see her start liquidating some of her most controversial holdings, not out of sudden sainthood, but out of a grim recognition. Her money can either keep paving over bodies or start unearthing them. As for the girls, the drama doesn't give either of them a neat bow. Elena's physical recovery plateaus. She'll walk, with a cane, but she'll never dance at a club until dawn again. Her art changes, gone are the delicate restorations of old faces. She starts making brutal, abstract installations out of broken plaster and medical tubing, pieces that critics alternately call self-indulgent trauma porn and the only honest art this city's produced in a decade. She refuses interviews, except for one written piece where she says, simply, "I was turned into an object. Now I make objects that remember." Meera, on the other hand, chooses anonymity over martyrdom. After testifying, she rejects Helena's offer of a stipend and apartment. That scene is quietly heartbreaking. Helena tries to frame it as practical, you need a safe place while they process the case, but Meera hears the subtext, guilt money. "Every room I've slept in with your name on the lease has nearly killed me," she says. "I need to know who I am when I'm not someone's project." In the last episode, we see her working under the table at a roadside diner in another city, hair dyed, face unremarkable under harsh neon. A man asks her name. She pauses, then says, "Meera," and for the first time we see a hint of peace in the way she wears it. Visually, the last images the show leaves us with are unsurprisingly about stone. The camera returns to the municipal depot from the beginning, now emptied out for investigation. The cracked bases where statues once stood. Dust outlines on the floor. Then, a cut to Helene and Elena walking through a new exhibition, Elena's installation of shattered marble suspended on wires, lit from within. The broken pieces cast a lace of shadows on their faces. Helene resists the urge to smooth Elena's hair. Instead, she asks, "Do you want me to step back?" Elena considers, then nods. Helena literally steps out of the frame, leaving Elena standing alone among the fragments of former beauty, now remade into something jagged and true. I have to admit, this final tableau got me more than any of the courtroom verdicts or headline montages. There's something profoundly unsettling about seeing a mother choose distance after spending an entire season tearing the world apart to close the gap. But it's the right kind of unsettling. It acknowledges that Helena's control, her relentless drive to fix, to own, to decide, is part of what allowed the fake Elena to slot in so smoothly in the first place. Letting go, here, is not abandonment, it's penance. Stepping back a bit, what makes My Daughter Was Hidden in a Statue stick with me isn't just its central sickening conceit. It's the way it layers all these questions about who gets to define reality. Adrian thinks he can sculpt the public narrative by sculpting actual bodies. Helene thinks she can buy the truth into existence. Victor medicalizes everyone's pain until it fits in his charts. Even the media, once the scandal breaks, rushes to flatten Elena and Meera into archetypes, the real one and the faker, saint and sinner. The show pushes back on that by constantly returning to the very physical, very unglamorous labor of healing, the sweat of rehab, the boredom of hiding, the clumsy attempts at new routines. There are definitely rough edges. Some side characters are undercooked. I would have loved more from Anya, for instance. She has a killer early arc as the friend who refuses to accept the first Elena's return at face value, sniffing out oddities before Helena does, only to disappear into the background once the conspiracy ramps up. The show teases tension between her and Meera. Imagine realizing your best friend has been replaced and then having to interact with the replacement, but doesn't fully mine it. Similarly, the mayor's political opposition remain more like a Greek chorus than fully realized people. They pop up to gloat and vanish when the plot doesn't need them. But where it puts its focus, it commits hard. The performances are ridiculously good across the main trio. Kim Hye-jin carries Helena's contradictions in every tightened jaw and exhausted slump. Sophia Park does double duty so well that there were moments I genuinely forgot it's the same actor in two roles, especially in those scenes where Meera is pretending to be Elena in front of Helene, and we, the audience, are watching an actor play an actor playing someone else badly. That's like emotional inception. And the directing supports them with shot choices that always lean into subjectivity. The camera hugs Helena's shoulder when she's losing control, dives into Elena's blurred vision when her PTSD triggers, hangs back at a distance when Mira dissociates and watches herself from outside her body. One thing I really appreciate is how the show uses sound to map interior states. Early on, Elena's entombment sequences are full of distorted external noises, forklifts, distant music from a radio, the dull thud of someone's footsteps overhead, because her whole world is defined by things she can't quite see. After she's freed, those sounds become intrusive flashbacks. When someone drops a heavy box in the clinic, we cut to a split second of her back in the statue. Conversely, Mira's world starts loud, subway announcements, campaign rallies, the constant buzz of Helena's high-rise life, and gradually quiets as her sense of self erodes. By the last episodes, there are scenes with her where the only sounds are her breathing and the faint scrape of a fork on a diner plate. It's an elegant way of tracking their arcs without a single line of expositional dialogue. If I had to pinpoint the single most disturbing aspect of the show, beyond the obvious, it's how banal the mechanisms of horror are. There's no secret cult, no exotic technology. It's just paperwork, surgery, storage logistics. A requisition order here, a mislabeled crate there. Adrian doesn't have to build a dungeon, he uses the city's existing labyrinth of underfunded depots and under-monitored clinics. The implication is that this kind of atrocity isn't some gothic aberration, it's a natural outcome of systems that treat people as inventory. That's a hard pill to swallow, and the show doesn't sugarcoat it. At the same time, it finds these pockets of grim humor that keep it from becoming unwatchably bleak. Ryan especially gets some dry one-liners, like the moment after Helene beats the thug with the wrench, and he surveys the scene and mutters, "Remind me never to complain about your coffee again," while wiping blood off his shoes. Or Lajos, exhausted after a 36-hour stretch, mishearing Elena's raspy, "Water, plea as, lawyer," and going into a panicked spiral before she rolls her eyes and croaks, "Calm down, I'm not suing you." Yet, those tiny human misfires feel real. Trauma is horrifying, but people still say dumb things in the middle of it. By the time the last credits roll, you realize the title, "My Daughter Was Hidden in a Statue," has morphed into something larger. Yes, that's literally true in the plot. But metaphorically, it's about how people, especially women, especially daughters, get turned into symbols all the time. Helena's grief statuifies Elena into a cause, Adrian statuifies her into a story of survival he can leverage, the media statuifies her into clickbait tragedy. The only person who really fights to be messy, angry, unfinished is Elena herself. And the show honors that by never fully smoothing her arc into inspiration porn. Personally, I finished this drama feeling, not satisfied, exactly, but rattled in a good way. It crawled into corners of my brain I didn't expect, like the next time I walked past a public sculpture, I caught myself wondering who catalogued it, who moved it, whose stories got stored and forgotten around it. That's not a normal side effect of watching a glossy political thriller, and it's why I think this one is going to sit with me longer than some of the more conventional, gotcha twist shows. There's more to unpack in how this thing lands, especially in terms of whether justice actually feels served, what the show ultimately thinks about money as a weapon, and whether it lets any of its characters off the hook too easily, but I'll pause the play-by-play there and dig into those ripples next. For me, the lingering question after the credits isn't, did they get him? It's, does any version of justice actually feel big enough for what they did? On paper, sure, the show checks the boxes. Adrian is indicted, Victor loses his license and faces charges for unlawful experimentation and conspiracy. A handful of mid-level city officials quietly resign for health reasons. The last we see of Adrian in any official capacity, he's in that glass box of the defendant's area, still in a crisp shirt like he can't quite let go of the optics, listening to Elena's recorded testimony being played for the jury. He flinches once when she describes the moment she realized the air hole in the statue was being deliberately restricted. That detail hits different because you know it wasn't necessary, it was cruelty. The verdict comes back guilty on several counts, and the courtroom ripples with that breathless exhale TV audiences are trained to read as catharsis. But the show almost immediately undermines that false sense of closure. In the very next scene, Ryan scrolls through news coverage on his phone with Helena. Half the headlines call Adrian disgraced and monstrous, sure. The other half frame him as tragic, talk about his fall from grace, speculate about a possible appeal. There's a talking head pundit earnestly wondering if the media circus around the Venus case has made a fair trial impossible. It's nauseating, and that's the point. The system that finally punished him is the same one already laying down straw for his soft landing. The show is honest about that. It doesn't end with a big, life without parole, title card. It tells us his sentence, 15 years, eligible for parole in 10 with good behavior, and then moves on, because the story's real concern isn't how long he rots, it's how the survivors continue. There's a scene where Helene watches a puff piece about a new, ethics in public art, initiative the city council pushes through to rehabilitate their image, and she laughs, not a happy laugh, a bitter, exhausted one. They found a way to turn him into a statue too, she says. One they can polish and walk around and forget there was a man inside. That line hits because it folds back into the show's whole statue metaphor in a way that feels almost too neat, but earned, punishment as display, not necessarily repair. Which loops us right back to Helena's relationship with money, because if there's any real leverage in this world, it isn't moral indignation, it's capital. One thing I appreciate is that the drama doesn't do a redemption montage where Helene suddenly gives all her billions away and opens a commune. She's still very much who she is, a woman used to getting her way, only now she's seen the ugliest extreme of that logic in someone else's hands. Early on, we watch her bribe, threaten, and litigate like it's second nature. By the final stretch, she's doing very similar things, funding investigative units, buying out warehouse to preserve evidence, paying for survivor support groups, but the framing shifts. Before, her philanthropy felt like PR frosting over something sour. After, it feels more like atonement and, occasionally, a genuine attempt to redistribute some of the power she's hoarded. There's a particularly sharp late scene where she's sitting across from a young councilwoman in a dingy office that doesn't even have proper blinds. The councilwoman wants Helena's support to establish an independent commission overseeing city storage and transfers. Helene could just stroke a check and walk out feeling benevolent. Instead, she insists on a clause that requires all donors, including her, to make their own holdings transparent too. The councilwoman raises an eyebrow. You realize that includes your land banks. Helene hesitates, then nods. Yes. That's the point. It's a small, bureaucratic moment, but it's one of the few times we see Helene voluntarily narrowing the gap between herself and the people her decisions affect. Does that let her off the hook? Not really, and the show knows it. It leaves plenty of ambiguity about the exact damage her past projects have done, the neighborhoods flattened for luxury condos, the community centers that never got funded. But it also trusts us to live in that gray. She is both the engine that took down Adrian and a product of the same class logic that made him possible. If you are looking for a clean moral hero, this drama will frustrate you. If you are fine sitting with a woman who's both complicit and corrective, it's fascinating. Where the show is much less forgiving is with Victor. If Adrian is the public face of evil, Victor is the banality of it, the guy who prints the consent forms and calibrates the anesthetic. We never get a teary confession or a tragic backstory that explains him. The closest we come is a quick glimpse of him at home, folding his daughter's school uniform, looking like any other upper-middle-class dad, then getting a text that makes his face go blank, client curious about other options if this works. He closes his eyes, you can see the sliver of conscience try to elbow through, and then he picks up his laptop and starts a new file. That's it. That's his moral crisis. He chooses comfort over humanity, and the show doesn't spend time redeeming that. And yet, even with him, the script sneaks in one uncomfortable question: how much of his monstrosity is individual, and how much is a medical system that rewards detachment? When he's finally on the stand and Elena's lawyer asks, "Did you ever think of her as a person?" he answers, "I thought of her as my responsibility to keep alive." It's chilling because it's true. He did keep her alive, technically. Just long enough for the experiment to be successful. It's a warped Hippocratic oath, and it makes you side-eye every bland hospital corridor you've ever walked down. Let's talk craft for a second, because all this thematic weight would fall flat without really precise filmmaking to hold it up. Visually, the show is doing a lot, but it almost never screams, "Look how clever I am." The cinematography leans heavily into contrasts, light versus shadow, smooth marble versus bruised skin, glass skylines versus damp basements, but it uses them to delineate character psychology more than to show off. Helena's world, initially, is overlit. Her penthouse is all floor-to-ceiling windows, reflective surfaces, sharp angles. The camera composition often frames her behind some kind of transparent barrier, glass doors, office partitions, as if she's in her own display case. After Elena's entombment is revealed, we start seeing her in tighter, grainier frames, often shot from slightly below, clutter closing in around her. Her wealth hasn't changed, but our gaze on it has. Those sleek surfaces start feeling less like success and more like isolation. Elena's subjective shots, meanwhile, are all about compression. Anytime we dip into her POV, even post-rescue, the field of vision narrows, corners darken, sounds muffle. There's an early therapy session where she tries to describe her time in the statue, and instead of flashbacks, we get her current view of the room slowly morphing. The walls crowd in, the window shrinks to a slit of light, the therapist's voice distorts into that distant warehouse echo. The camera doesn't just cut back, it jerks, like whoever's holding it flinched. It's such an effective way of putting us in a mind that's been taught that space equals threat. Mira's scenes, especially in the middle of the show when she's deep in her double life, often use mirrors and reflective surfaces in really unsettling ways. There's that elevator perspective I mentioned, but also little moments, a spoon in the penthouse kitchen reflecting her face at a weird angle, the glass of a framed family photo catching her half in, half out. One particularly airy shot has her looking at the Venus from afar at Adrian's HQ. The polished floor gives us a shimmery, warped duplicate of her silhouette next to the statue, like she's halfway between subject and object. It's not subtle, but in a story this big, it doesn't need to be. It's bold in exactly the way the premise demands. Music-wise, I grew to love how restrained the score is. With material this dark, it would have been so easy to lean into sad pianos and horror stabs every 5 minutes. Instead, the composers mostly use these thin, reedy tones, sort of like board glass, that slide in under key moments. No huge melody you can hum later, more like a persistent tension on the edge of hearing. The only times the music really swells are the scenes where someone is manipulating narrative in universe, Adrian's rallies, Helena's staged press appearances, the museum gala. When people perform feelings, the soundtrack performs along with them. When they're actually in pain, things go quiet. That contrast does so much heavy lifting in terms of mood. Now, on performance, this is one of those rare dramas where you can tell the casting people were thinking about faces as architecture. Kim Hye-jin has this incredibly readable micro-expression range. She can go from boardroom predator to terrified mother with nothing more than a shift in her jawline. What impressed me most is how willing she is to let Helene be ugly, not physically, but morally. There are scenes where she is clearly in the wrong, snapping at Elena for not recovering fast enough, redirecting guilt onto everyone but herself, and Hye-jin doesn't soften it. She plays Helene as someone who has spent decades believing she is the smartest person in every room and is not about to relinquish that. Even when the room is her daughter's makeshift ICU. Sophia Park, doing double duty, is the beating heart of the whole thing. Her Elena and Mira share the same bone structure, obviously, but she shifts their center of gravity in such precise ways. Elena moves from her hips, even post-trauma, like she's used to taking up space she's not supposed to. Mira, even when she's Elena, carries tension up in her shoulders, like she's trying to make herself smaller without being noticed. Voice-wise, her fake Elena at first is just a half octave too high, a little too bright, and as the imposter gets more entangled, that voice relaxes into something closer to her own, until, in that museum gala scene, when she finally drops the performance entirely, you hear her actual timbre for the first time. It's like watching a mask physically fall. A subtle performance I haven't mentioned much is Helena's mother, the grandmother. She could have been a stock, old woman clutching rosary beads stereotype. Instead, the actor plays her as passive-aggressive and sharp, the kind of person who has survived by not looking too closely at where the money comes from. She's the one who, early on, chooses to believe the fake Elena instantly and scolds Helene for being cold. Later, when the truth comes out, she's the one who keeps lighting candles for both girls in the same dish. There's this heartbreaking moment where she tells Mira, "You are not my Elena, but you were a child someone should have protected." I failed at both. The show gives even its tertiary characters that little moral curve. If I sound like I'm gushing, I kind of am, but it's not blind. There are places where the writing stumbles. A few monologues hit like writers' room speeches rather than things a human would say under stress. Adrian's "we are both sculptors" riff in the prison visit is a bit on the nose, even if it gets the job done. There are a couple of conveniently overheard conversations that push the plot along when it's flagging. And the trial arc being compressed means we don't really see how messy that process would be in real life. No witness intimidation, no jury tampering beyond what's implied in hushed hallway chats. If you are a legal drama purist, you might find that thin. But honestly, I'm willing to forgive those stumbles because the emotional throughline is so strong. The show knows exactly what its core is: a mother who refused to accept the narrative fed to her, a daughter who refused to let her body be the last word on her, and another daughter-shaped person caught in the middle trying to claw herself out of borrowed skin. Everything else, politics, art theory, body horror, is orbiting that. If you come to this hoping for a standard whodunit, you are going to realize pretty quickly that the who is answered much earlier than usual. By the time Helena cracks open the statue, we already understand that Adrian and Victor are behind it. The tension isn't, will she figure it out? It's, what will it cost everyone once she does? That's a subtle but important storytelling shift. It turns the show from a puzzle box into more of a pressure cooker, where the real suspense is about people's thresholds, how much violence, how much self-betrayal, how much compromise they'll tolerate before something inside them snaps. I also want to give the writers credit for not sanitizing trauma into easily digestible TV moments. One of the scenes that gutted me most is actually a small one late in the run. Elena goes to a supermarket for the first time since everything. It's brightly lit, generic pop playing, carts squeaking. On paper, totally mundane. But you watch her freeze between the tall aisles, hemmed in by shelves on both sides. The camera drifts up just slightly, making the rows look like towering walls. A stock boy drops a box somewhere and the echo reverberates too long. For a second, you see her thrust back into the statue. Her hand jerks toward her throat like she expects to feel plaster. She abandons the basket and walks out, leaving Helena staring after her, holding a bunch of bananas and realizing she cannot strategize her daughter out of this. That one hit me in the chest. I've never been stuck inside a statue, obviously, but I've had panic attacks in grocery stores for reasons that felt, at the time, just as irrational. And there was something deeply humane in the way the show lingeringly treats that as equally real trauma compared to the big, headline-worthy ordeal. It says, yes, the court case matters, the mayor's downfall matters, but so does whether this woman can ever buy her own food without feeling like the ceiling's closing. If I had to pick a contrarian-ish angle beyond nitpicking Adrian, it would be this: I don't think the show is quite as radical about class as some people are praising it for. Yes, it skewers corrupt politicians. Yes, it interrogates Helena's power. But at the end of the day, the heroes who make it through are still the rich woman and the daughter of a rich woman, even if they're scarred. Mira walks off into a more uncertain, precarious life, outside Helena's orbit. We are supposed to read that as empowering, and to an extent, it is. She chooses not to be someone's project anymore. But the practical reality is she's leaving protective money behind in a world that clearly doesn't care about people without it. There's an ambivalence there the show touches on but doesn't fully dwell in, probably because lingering too long would have turned the ending even bleaker. That said, I do appreciate that Helena doesn't adopt Mira in some glossy late episode twist. I was bracing myself for that, to be honest, for a neat "now I have two daughters" shot of them having brunch on a terrace. The writers resist that. They let the relationship remain this raw, complicated bruise. Elena never fully forgives her, and Mira never fully forgives herself. The last time we see them in the same frame, they're not hugging, they're sitting on opposite ends of a waiting room bench outside yet another legal meeting, not looking at each other, but also not leaving. There's a quiet acknowledgement in that distance: we are tied together, but we are not going to pretend this is something it's not. So who is this show for? Honestly, for people with a pretty high tolerance for darkness, who also like their darkness to come with brains. If the idea of long, quiet scenes sitting in hospital rooms and storage depots bores you, and you mostly want twisty puzzle box plotting, this might feel slow in patches. If you are sensitive to confined space horror or medical body stuff, be warned, the statue sequences, especially the early ones where Elena is just realizing where she is, are some of the most skin-crawling I've seen on TV in years. It's not graphic gore, but it's psychologically intense. On the flip side, if you are tired of thrillers that use women's suffering as a cheap inciting incident and then pivot to some buddy cop romp, this is almost the corrective. It refuses to move on. It stays with the victim, and the other victim, and the mother, and it asks, over and over, okay, but what does this feel like 3 weeks later? 3 months later? What happens when the news cycle moves on and your body doesn't? Performance heads are going to have a field day dissecting Sophia Park's doubling work. People who love visual motifs will be pausing frames to catch all the ways statues and reflections sneak into the background. If you liked how something like Sharp Objects or The Undoing handled wealthy families and ugly secrets, but wished they'd pushed the metaphor into more literal, disturbing territory, this scratches that itch. For me, balancing all the admiration and the discomfort, this lands as one of those rare thrillers that I both enjoyed in the moment and keep chewing on after. There are lines I'll roll my eyes at on rewatch, minor arcs I'll wish had more time, but the core images, the condensation on cold marble lips, Helena's hands bleeding as she claws plaster away, two identical faces side by side under museum lights, those feel carved in. Pun fully intended. If you've made it this far into my ramble, you are exactly my kind of person. You care about how stories are told as much as what happens in them. And this one, for all its extremity, feels weirdly grounded in the ways power twists the everyday. It turns something as innocuous as a city statue into a question: how many things in our environment were built on top of someone else being silenced? I'll wrap it here before I start side-eyeing every piece of public art in my own neighborhood. I'm really curious where you land on this one. Did you feel like the show did right by Elena and Mira? Do you think Helena's late-in-life crisis about her money actually changes anything, or is it just rich lady guilt with better PR? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I actually do read them, and this is the kind of drama that's way more interesting when you hear how it hit other people. If you found this breakdown useful, or you just like having your TV shows dissected within an inch of their lives, hit like so the algorithm doesn't entomb this channel in some forgotten corner of the internet. And if you want more long-form, spoiler-heavy dives like this, consider subscribing to Jonota News. We go deep, we get weird, and we absolutely will make you paranoid about your home decor. Thanks for hanging out with me, take care of your nervous system, and I'll see you in the next one.